this is Akhtar and welcome to episode 7 of our Digimon Tamers Review series. We're officially past the halfway mark, and in this episode, we'll be taking a look at the US Digivolving Guilmon to Gallantmon figure. For long-time Akhtar's Reviews fans, you'd know that this isn't the first time this figure has been on this channel. I compared this figure to the Japanese version in the Japanese version's review. But for very long-time Akhtar's Reviews fans, you'd know that I've actually reviewed this figure before as one of my very first figure reviews over a decade ago, which has since been taken down. Time sure flies. Tempest Fugit and all that. In both those videos, how am I going to put this nicely? Shat all over the figure. Metaphorically, of course. And I think you can see why. The Gilmon mode is really bad. The proportions make him far more evocative of bad Gilmon cosplay, nay, a cheap Gilmon Halloween costume than anything else. Where do I even begin? The head is too small, the shoulders are too broad, the claws are too big, the waist is too thin, the belly is too flat, the legs are too long, so on and so forth. In all fairness, in those previous reviews, the legs weren't bent far enough and the reverse knee joints weren't fully extended. While I agree it does improve the stance quite significantly, there's just no getting around the fact that it's Gilmon with human proportions. Whatever the case, the kibble is horrendous as well. We have golden bits of Gallantmon's armor all over the figure, Gallantmon's hands are clearly visible, and the back is blatantly the front of Gallantmon. Looking at the prototype of the Digimon figure from the Digivolving Spirits line, like Alphamon, the kibble is managed by having the figure be a shell former. While that's definitely the best solution for a transforming figure with remarkably different modes, as flawed as this figure is, I can't help but respect the designers for trying to integrate the two modes together. Though, I just can't forgive this tail. It's so bad! Unlike the Japanese version, there's just absolutely no effort to hide the fact that it's Gallantmon's lance. Secondly, I don't understand why they made the lance peg into Gallantmon's knees instead of his waist like on the Japanese version. Not only does it create this awful gap, it also locks up his leg articulation. All that's left for him articulation-wise are very basic joints that afford him the most pathetic of poses. The head can move from side to side. The arms can swivel all the way around, but only forwards and backwards. The elbow joints can bend only this much, and the arms are also limited by these Gilmon forearm pieces that are formed from Gallantmon's shoulder pads. He does have a really good waist joint, but as for his legs, these reverse knee joints are extremely loose. But his feet do have ball joints, though they are of little use in this mode. His shield, however, is handled much better, in that they made it a base for Gilmon. That's actually pretty ingenious. Not only does it make for a really well-designed base, you can store the plastic cape under it as well, so you won't have any leftover accessories when you display him in Gilmon mode. Not sure why you'd ever want to display him in Gilmon mode, but at least the option's there. Unfortunately, this does mean that the shield has two rather unsightly nip pegs on them, and while we're on the subject of the shield, it's lacking quite a bit of paint on the inner golden ring and triangles. The lack of paint does spread over onto the figure as well, as just like Gallantmon, we have a ton of sculpted detail that's just not painted in true Bandai of America fashion. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had enough of the Gilmon mode for the rest of my life. Let's make way for one of the Royal Knights to make his grand appearance. First, we start off by removing what obviously isn't Gilmon's tail. We then straighten the legs and collapse the reverse knee joints. Flip out Gallantmon's middle toe while flipping in Gilmon's heel. Extend the feet, rotate it around, and collapse it back into place. Note there are two sets of extendable knee joints, but I recommend only extending the bottom set for now. Flip up Gilmon's forearms and rotate these pieces around to reveal the gold detailing. And do the same for the claws. Extend the waist and lock it into place. Open Gallantmon's chest, take out the ponytail, rotate Gilmon's head around, and take his face and store it into the chest. We unfold the ponytail and lift the head spike. Take his shoulder pads and maneuver them into place while straightening his arms and rotating his wrists. And last but not least, we extend the cape, and peg it onto his back. Maybe it's because of how bad the Gilmon mode was, but the Gallantmon mode is just so much better. Not to say it's actually anywhere near good, of course. There are still many inaccuracies and lack of paint, such as the feet, kneecaps, thighs, waist, forearm and head crest. Worst of all is the head. It really doesn't manage to capture the rather dignified and imposing appearance of Gallantmon. The reason for this is the lack of side cheek guards due to how they needed to stuff his head inside Gilmon's. Speaking of which, that's actually one aspect of this transformation that I really do like, how his head crest is formed from Gilmon's ears. Moving on, the posability isn't good in this mode either. While his ponytail can be freely posed, the head lacks any decent articulation due to the transformation. Same as in Gilmon mode, the shoulders are on very limited ball joints that might as well be on swivel joints. The elbows can't even bend to 90 degrees, but at least he now has a wrist swivel. While he does retain that wonderful waist joint, the legs are where things get interesting. Once again, we have really limited ball joints that might as well be diagonally cut swivel joints for his thighs. For his knees, however, as mentioned during the transformation sequence, there are actually two sets of extendable joints. Extending them both will cause him to become really unstable and look really wonky, so I recommend collapsing the top set of joints. But if you fully extend them, he does get a knee bend. Even without extending them, he does have a thigh swivel, and his feet are on proper ball joints that are somewhat limited by the surrounding armor pieces. The biggest issue with his articulation, in my opinion, is the lack of a hinged wrist joint. With the way the shield attaches, it's pretty much impossible to have him holding his shield straight out. Something that also limits his posability is his plastic cape, but not in the way that you'd think. It's static and really ruins what little dynamism this figure's poses offer. Finally, let's talk about his lance. As already evident in Gilmon mode, it's not only segmented, but it's also not painted in the slightest, making it look nothing like his on-screen lance. This lance is absolutely atrocious. If you've seen my review of the Japanese version of this figure, you'd know that it fixes most of the issues I've brought up in this review. It has a ton more paint, it's far more accurate, has way better articulation with a hinged wrist, and it even has the cloth cape and die-cast armor parts. Something that I also like on the Japanese version is how the Gilmon claws / Dukemon shoulder pads peg into place. So obviously, between the US version and the Japanese version, I'd recommend the US version? Wait, what? Dun dun dun! No, I've not gone crazy. In the many years since I reviewed the Japanese version, there have been certain, developments. Let's just say there's a reason why I've yet to show the Japanese figure on screen until now. Are you ready? Well, here it is. Yup, the pristine white plastic has turned a piss yellow. This is something related to UV light causing a photochemical reaction in the plastic, and some white plastics, like the kind used in this figure, are far more susceptible than others, turning yellow even without any exposure to sunlight. Not only that, the plastic becomes brittle. In a rather interesting twist, it's the Japanese version that suffers from plastic degradation. After enough time has passed, the rather thin hinges that make up Gilmon's reverse knee joints just shatter if and when you attempt to transform him. Note that this is not an isolated incident. This can and will happen to all evolving Dukemon figures given enough time. Mine are now solidly glued in place. Next, the chrome. Yes, while I did praise the chrome on the Japanese version, I have since grown to hate and abhor chrome over the years of being a collector. Not only is it a scratch and fingerprint magnet, chrome cracks, peels, and flakes, and that's exactly what's been happening on my Japanese figure. I'd gladly take a lack of paint over goddamn chrome. One final reason as to why I wouldn't recommend the Japanese version over the US one is scale. Yes, I know scale means nothing when it comes to Digivolving figures, especially when you have Mega Gallantmon in your lineup. But if you want your Gallantmon figure to fit in with your Mega Gallantmon and Sakuramon figures, you've got to get the US version. So, in conclusion, Gallantmon is one of the most iconic Digimon from both Digimon Tamers and the franchise as a whole. If you're a Digimon fan, you need a Gallantmon figure in your collection. And until the Digivolving Spirits Dukemon figure gets made, it's never going to get made, is it? This is going to be your best bet for a transforming Gallantmon figure. You could buy the DX version and call it a day, but if you're like me and you need your Digimon figures to transform, I'd pick this guy up over the Japanese version. The Japanese version does do a ton of things better, but no lack of paint, limited articulation or static cape can be worse than a figure with degrading plastic and peeling chrome. Not to mention, due to the character's popularity, they upped the production numbers of the US version and he's still readily available both new and used for a very decent price. So, this is Actor saying, see you guys in the next episode of our Digimon Tamers series of reviews.